Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IG Community Roundtable hosted by Steve Weissman, myself, Donda Young, and Jesse Wilkins. We do this gig once a month. Sometimes we take a little bit of break in the summer, so don't be surprised if you see a little break. Um, but we do this thing because we want to not only share our knowledge with folks, but it's also about collectively sharing our knowledge with each other. Lessons learned, tips, tricks, you name it. We like to hear from the audience. This is not three talking heads at you. This is whoever's on the call. Sharing is caring, as I say. So please feel free to interject if you're in an office and talking out loud is a little challenging because I know in the past we've had some folks there. Please feel free to throw your questions or your comments or whatever into the chat. I'm going to designate Jesse to read those out on behalf of the person that may post. But to kick this off, we are talking about dashboards. And again, this is meant to be a roundtable, not the three talking heads. So please join in, chime in. Um, so what do I mean by this dashboard thing? We all probably know what that is, but it really serves to simplify some complex data into, visuals. We all like pictures, right? Pie charts, etc., etc. Actionable insights. It helps users monitor performance, identify trends, and make informed decisions quickly. At least that's the hope, right? Um, so the purpose is really get that visualization piece, some real-time monitoring, strategic decision support, again, that highlighting trends or, anomalies, maybe some progress towards goals, as well as insights, high level summaries and, getting some clarity through maybe some spreadsheets, some reports, getting some snapshots of broader data sets that may help us make improved decisions and enhance our communications, etc. So that's kind of to tee us up. And I really want us to think about and talk about from this dashboard visualization perspective, um, what might an IG dashboard look like? What would you include?
What do you include?
Mm,
See, that's my question is just that the complexity of what we do makes dashboard design really, really difficult. Well, especially in the work that we do, where a question could come in like from a service end. So we'd want service-based dashboards of what client ministries are asking us to do, like help them with SharePoint sites. And the question will come in like, help me create an organization for a SharePoint site. And that morphs into a bunch of other questions. So one of the things that we struggle with is metrics for customer service with requests that come in from one thing and mean multiple or not at all the same topic.
So, no, that's good. And consistent with the theme. So now I have other questions based on what you
You're
said.
welcome.
That's why you're here. Um, and that's in some ways, in my mind, that this is the genesis of today's session. We all know we need to collect metrics. And when I hear about that kind of a thing, I think, okay, metrics like, well, how many calls do you get? Where are they coming from? Blah, blah, blah. But there's a level behind that, and which is, I think, what you're getting at, Angela, which is why are they asking for this? Okay, so please set up a structure for. How do you report on that? I mean, do we look to project management for that kind of thing? Because when I think of set up a structure or a chart, then I'm thinking about process flows and communication trails and deadline tracking. You know, governance is a project, but it's different than like install this software kind of project. For one thing, there's not any end to it. So how far has your thinking gone, or has it yet, in terms of trying to draft that kind of what are we going to count, or anybody else in a similar boat? What's the behind the scenes
Well,
thinking?
see, reporting is the big thing for governance to almost highlight what we do and the complexity what we do. And then bringing in another tool of AI to justify that AI can do help with some of the work that we do, but not all of it. So I think that's a struggle. So I don't think that totally answered your question, Dee, but this is my
Well, but you
issue.
raised another good one, because now you
Yeah,
used
you're
AI
welcome.
in a sentence, which I
Hmm.
won't distract with. Yes. um, but that to me raises a different set but overlapping set of questions. Because if you're going to use AI and you want to justify the use of AI, presumably there's some savings of something somewhere. And so you need to report on that.
Yep.
So guys,
Oh,
I'm gonna share one of the dashboards that I found,
mm,
and in by no means does this roundtable purport to support any particular vendor. We are typically vendor agnostic. So are you seeing the dashboard?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I thought that this is an IBM InfoSphere dashboard. I just quickly Googled today. Um, and a few things I think from a governance perspective that you could glean in a dashboard is certainly what's the exceptions to the rule, right? So if you have some IG rules or even data quality rules in a dashboard, those are some things that could potentially help you with mitigating, oh, this particular data steward, for example, has had some challenges. We're seeing some uptick on managing some of the um, data quality or information rules or policies. Um, I am not, yes, ex-IBM are here, but I am not an InfoSphere guru, don't even pretend to be, right? I don't wear that hat. But this is just an example that was out there that I found that would be relevant to this conversation and maybe spark some thought process. So it does give um, some information here at the bottom, some help summary, if you will. But then I also have another dashboard that I can share, and let me see if I can flip that over real quickly. And this is another data quality specific. And this is Microsoft. So two big players in the space. Again, we do not advocate for one over the other or any. It's really whatever your organization feels comfortable with. You can even use Power BI tools to maybe pull some data out of spreadsheets or wherever your information may live to be able to build some dashboards as well. But you know, I would say if you're trying to monitor privacy, for example, if you had any incidents, or maybe your retention rules, maybe another one where you may want to see if, oh, well, we disposed of a certain amount of data, or we have eligible data for disposition within these particular buckets depending on where your information lives, right? That could be part of a dashboard. Um, Usually what I've seen in dashboards, policies, now I'm not talking necessarily just IG. That could be your privacy, that could be your cyber, that, you name it, your risk policies and ways to quantify against some of those. And it really depends on what it is that you want to quantify and what your leadership is looking for.
well, and I think that's maybe the most important point we've talked about so far, right? Is what is the story that the dashboard is trying to tell, because having run call centers and having run these types of metrics for clients and for end user organizations, there's an awful lot of stuff we can measure. We can measure. We have the capability of measuring. But if it's not telling a story, and I don't mean fudging the data either, but if it's not telling a story that's meaningful to the audience for that dashboard, why are you going through that effort,
Hmm.
right? So one of the big pushbacks I'm getting from one of our current clients is their law firm, and to Melissa's point, um, lots of matter mobility stuff, lots of transfers, lots of needing to be aware of where data is in the process, right? Well, the numbers are nice. They want to know trends. They want to know the story underneath the story. What story is the data trying to tell us? And so that's caused us to have to rethink a lot of the metrics we gather, because does it really matter if you did 2,712 this month and 1,911 next month? Maybe, maybe not. But what's the trend year over year? What's the trend month over month? And I see that Melvin has a question. Go ahead, Melvin. You're on the air.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
We
Yes.
can now.
Okay, yeah, it's important to unmute yourself. Hey, Jesse, good seeing you again.
Yeah.
This is the way I see kind of the whole dashboard thing. There's an audience for this material, and the way I look at it is sort of like three buckets. The first bucket is the executive bucket. Whenever I implement a program, IG program, I look to develop a dashboard that I can produce and share with the executives. Secondary category is the operational side of things, which I think the previous examples we shared by Donda are excellent examples where you want to see where we're having our success, where we need to improve. And the most important thing I think is when you have a program, you have goals, you have strategic goals, you have um, various different things that you're measured within your company, and you're going to be graded on that. You're going to get raises, you're going to get promotions based on those kinds of things. So I think it's important to align your dashboard, your metrics to the professional goals, organizational goals, as well as the operational goals of the program. So, however that's reflected in those categories of dashboards, I think is an effective approach to creating your dashboard and sharing those metrics.
Agree completely. Thank you, Melvin. I don't need to talk anymore. I'm done. He
Good
just
night,
said it all.
everybody.
Say that this is my first
Yay.
meeting. This is my first meeting.
Great job, man. You did great. I love
Nice
it.
start.
I love it. No,
Appreciate it.
you're spot on, really. It does depend on the audience, tailor your communications to the audience that you need to speak to. That changes from mid-management to senior management to operational, it truly does. And the purpose of what each of them need out of it.
I have a truly hateful story about a dashboard that I'm going to share.
Do tell.
Uh, when I first entered the industry, I worked for a software company in our space, and I was a software tester. And then we did a shakeup, and I became the tech support manager. So I was running our call center, 8 people in the US, and then we had a satellite office in the UK and another one in New Zealand. So every week I had to break down the cost of our tech support calls. And so I had to do this by product. So that meant that I had to get all the call logs from the phone system, um, calculate them in minutes, figure out who had taken the call, calculate their salary in minutes, apply it to the duration of the call for every single call we got, which might be 100, 150 calls a week, and then produce this lovely pie or this lovely line chart that would show the cost of Alchemy web server this month or this week was $111 per call, whereas the cost of Data Grabber was $27 a call. What did that mean? I don't know, but they wanted it. So And we would do trends, right? And so next week, Data Grabber's $99 a call, and Alchemy Web Server's only $11 a call because we only had one call and it was short. Reboot, and it fixed it. After 6 months of doing this, I finally went to my boss, who was the CFO, and I asked him, "What do you use these numbers for?" And he said, "I have no idea. I don't know what you're trying to tell me here. I ignore them." 8 hours a week it took me to generate those numbers, sometimes more. I got back a solid day per week of my life because I realized that those metrics were not only useless, but even if they had been of some value, the guy they were tailored to wasn't even bothering to read them because he couldn't figure out how they were useful. So the moral of the story is, as I put in the chat, don't measure things that aren't worth measuring, and don't manage things that aren't worth managing. Don't put things in the dashboard just to make it more data intensive. Part of the value of the dashboard, and I think Don alluded to this at the start of the call, is it's easy to read for executives with limited attention span
And time.
and time.
All right, so then I'm back to my earlier thought / question shared. I'm going to blame Angela because you triggered it. Plus, she's a convenient target. Um,
We love you, Angela.
yes, we do.
Love you too.
So, so I'm back to what are we measuring? Now, and it was in the chat too, and I'm sorry I forget who wrote it, but the dashboard that you shared, Donda, that I think it was the first one, it was all about exceptions. Okay, and I like that because that's meaningful. Because the better at something you get, the fewer exceptions there are, and that's a trend worth tracking, and you can assign dollar value to, and all those things. Because ultimately, the data that we're presenting could lead to the project continuing to get funding or whatever. So
Or
you're
not.
demonstrating some sort of value. So much of what we do, and here's where I struggle, is sort of softer. You know, we've all run into this, but I'm relatively fresh off a project where the whole political defending my fiefdom internally kind of thing led to such slowdowns in things. It's like how, that struck me as something that certainly should be reportable and measurable, but how do you measure it? You expected something in 2 weeks and you never got it, or it took them 6 months to respond, or so, for the group, help me out here. Speeds and fees, as we used to say in the scanning business, are pretty straightforward. How many exceptions is that going down? How long does it take to respond to a particular kind of inquiry? That's pretty straightforward. So much of doing governance right, at least the way I think of it and practice it, has to do with the human side of it. Trying to extract from people what they do, marry it up with what other people think, especially senior executives. They think that's what they do and they don't. Trying to bridge those divides. How do you do? Is that something that's worth dashboarding? And at the far end, if somebody wants to do an audit, here's some data that would be useful in some fashion. Is it worth it? Do you do it? Should we do it? Help.
Melvin had a question, kind of a follow-up question in the chat. My challenge with dashboards has been acquiring the data from different systems and stakeholders. What are your challenges and how did you address it? And I know that earlier Melissa had said something that I had responded to about using Power BI. And I think Don alluded to that as well. So certainly a lot of these tools are accessible through tools like Power BI, once you figure out what the data is that you want. But again, to Melvin's question, what are the rest of you doing? Or what challenges are you finding in building meaningful dashboards?
Just to add, I forgot to say a lot of it's political.
Oh,
When you're dealing with certain stakeholders like IT, and sometimes privacy and sometimes security. Sometimes they don't want to play in the same sandbox.
That's kind of what I was getting at, although you articulated it a lot cleaner, a lot more cleanly than I did. Because I think that's an important part of the story, to use your word, Jesse, and I agree. On a certain level, this is marketing. You want the senior team to hear a story of success and or at least progress. Um, some of it is operational, and I know Donda, you had thrown some of this in the chat too. So on a more hands-on, uh, from a hands-on perspective, how are we doing? We don't have to share all the warts and all with the senior team, but we need to know what they are. And then the other, you dig down deeper and you get to the people who are actually doing work and certain types of productivity. If some of these areas, some of the people you deal with end up being a black hole, are there systems that they're using that we can pull from? And how long does that take and which thing, so I'm talking to myself in circles because a lot of times, especially in larger scale projects, I feel like I get run around into circles. And I see some people nodding, so I'm glad to know it's not just me. But what, from a tools perspective, what are you guys pulling from? Because even if you don't have a formal dashboard, you've got to be keeping score in some fashion, I would think.
It's
Lewis,
like
go ahead.
oh, sorry.
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
okay,
thank you.
Shelley.
I can't seem to find the hand raise thing on this Zoom, like whatever. So pardon me. What I used to do when I was working with government was reach for other people's dashboards because the operational metrics seemed to me to be a lot more important than my own metrics. But that meant that when you reach for their dashboard, you need to be able to find something where you can claim a role. So if we gave X number answers in the call center, that meant we gave out X amount of information. Those answers had to be accurate and they needed to be accessible. So that wasn't a separate metric for us, but it was a metric that was still meaningful to the people at the organization.
So a little forensic trail you're building.
And it's not, for some reason, it's not under React on my screen. God knows why.
That's so weird.
I think Shelley had something to say.
I was just going to talk about it's like trying to put metrics on change management because that's the huge part of like information management type projects is that change. Like I'm so happy that my people around here, I've been doing a SharePoint implementation project and they don't talk about folders. It's an F word. Well, how can I show how great that is and wonderful that is? I have KPIs on how many pages and how many things that they did today, but that doesn't really matter. Like some of that doesn't matter because it's like how many people visited the SharePoint site? Well, today they did, but yesterday they didn't because they were busy with snow clearance and those types of things. So I don't know. I guess I've always been at the user end and I just hate these big high level metrics that don't make sense, these numbers that don't make sense that the executives do want to see.
But I think several people put in the chat that part of that probably comes from a need to have a conversation with those stakeholders and figure out what exactly is the story that they're looking for, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that there's got to be 50 metrics or that everything is calculated like my call horrible, terrifying example. But, is there, and maybe this is the question, maybe this is the one takeaway. What is the one thing you, meaning the person you're talking to, what is the one thing you want to know about our program? And I think if it's kind of a riff on the what's in it for me thing. What's the one thing that you want to know about our program? And then, you can flesh that out and see, is that something that matters? Is it something we can measure? And is it something that's going to be meaningful to anybody else? The CFO cared, I thought, about the cost per call. And then it turns out he didn't. But nobody else would have cared, certainly.
So I have a question. And so when I worked at Lighthouse, We had client success. And so, and I hear these conversations, and one of my partners now is in client success as well. And I feel so, and just hearing what you said, Jesse, and what others said about tailoring your dashboard to the audience, is client success involved at all in an information governance project? Because I think that would help um, get some meaningful metrics, maybe the bare minimum, to express the voice of the customer, and whether that's the external customer or internal based on, your organization, how it's structured. But would that be useful to help kind of, tailor the types of metrics that would make sense for an organization? Hope I wasn't,
Well,
oh,
it
I'm
could.
not on mute.
No, we're all just thinking. To me,
No
it
smoke.
almost sounds like I don't know, quite say a customer satisfaction, but
But bring it in,
there is a
right?
tie in there because if they're not satisfied, if it speaks to user buy-in. If you're trying to encourage the use of a new system or a different way of working, or even just you're going to keep doing what you're doing, but instead of putting it on the shared drive, you got to put it into, iManage or SharePoint or something. If they're resistant or they don't understand it, they're not going to do it. So I can definitely see the tie in there between that kind of a satisfaction, engagement, whatever you want to call it, back to the change management and usage, whether it's number of accesses or I don't know what. Is that, and Nick, I know you've been waiting patiently too, and I think Angela, you had your hand up as well. But at least is that kind of what you were thinking, or did I miss the mark?
Probably no, because I mean, when I hear the conversation, I'm thinking like especially the example that Jesse gave, because I also worked in a call center capacity in a leadership role, and we were having to report on all types of metrics. And so I just wondered if you actually knew what was important to the company. So it's almost like you use CS to look inward, to tie to like organizational goals that make sense, that will drive metrics. So that's kind of where my head was thinking, like, thinking creatively, because it seems like the issues are, still the same, right? So
Nick, go ahead. You're on mute, my friend.
Thank you. So
Well,
Jesse had the horrible story with the dashboards at the call center, but when he asked the CFO said, "You're right, this does not make sense." But sometimes there's an SLA, the service level agreement, where the executive will say, "Hey, this is just what we do because it's part of the contract or the agreement." And I think at that point, it's the job of the IG leaders to then capture metrics. For example, we had quarterly audits. We had to audit every file physically every quarter. And that took about 40 hours a month of one of my staff members' time, right? And so I captured how many files are lost, right, and misplaced. And if it's like 1 or 0, I was able to go to biannual audits and free up that time. So we often the executives follow precedent. It's always been that way. It's agreed to be that way. And it's our job as IG leaders to tell the story we want. And then they'll say, oh, well, that makes sense. But they're not going to tell us it makes sense until we give the numbers that guide them in the logical direction.
no, I love that you brought in the SLAs, the service level agreements, because that absolutely can help with building your dashboard. But what I would add to that, and this is an experience I had while at IBM, is those service level agreements aren't always written in the best light, right? And that's not on an IBM thing, that just it's the people that's developing it, right? So it really takes, in my mind, a, an effort of attention with the folks that are drawing up the SLAs to make sure that the right resources are in place, to make sure that they're written in a way that it makes sense for the dashboarding. It's going to make sense for the people that are going to be looking at this stuff. It goes back to that know your audience. But don't make them so astronomically crazy that you can't report on it. Yes, um, in some, I'll say IG and records management spaces, you're reporting on. I have a friend of mine in the space, and she's a third-party administrator, and the number of widgets that are being reported on every month, in my mind, is crazy. How many files did you file? How many were disposed of? How many boxes did you retrieve? How many widgets were found? But there's a lot of more meaningful kind of thing. How many requests did you fulfill this month? How many didn't get fulfilled this month, or whatever it happens to be? Metrics for metrics' sake, and putting those metrics into a dashboard. Okay, great. But again, it goes back to the meaning. What are you getting out of it? What's the value to you, to your operation, to your leadership team? Just to say that you did all the widgets, okay. What value does that bring? That's the story that you want to be able to tell. And can that dashboard tell that story very easily?
I love the turn that this took, because to me, here's another takeaway. I see your takeaway, Jesse, and I raise you one more. We already know that when it comes to governance, the tentacles reach everywhere, even though a lot of other people in the organization may not recognize that. We still have the garbage in, garbage out discussion as it relates to AI, which to me isn't a discussion, it's a given. And I saw it was in the chat too, that very phrase. I hadn't really thought about it as another tentacle, that when it comes to setting the objectives, making sure they're measurable, that's certainly not news, but the role that we in governance can play to help with that, I could just easily be a reflection of the nature of the clients that I tend to work with. That hasn't really surfaced anywhere that I can think of as a line item in an objective. What are we trying to accomplish? We want to get into the conversations as it relates to privacy and security and, and all the things. This is a really good one, and a very important one, because this tentacle reaches very far and very deep in an organization. Whether you're talking about an SLA with an outside, third party, or even in quotes, an SLA in terms of internal expectations.
Mhm.
Being able to write it down and follow it all the way through to what's reported in the dashboard, and how much faith do we have in the data that's feeding that dashboard. It all comes back to information. So that was pretty cool, I thought.
Agree.
Yeah, one of so two quick stories. In the law firm space, we track an awful lot of metrics, and Nick referred to this a little bit earlier. Because I'm still relatively new to the law firm space, a lot of the metrics don't make sense to me. But the good news is that they don't make sense to a lot of other people either, which is fascinating to me. And so now, by dint of my having kind of fresh eyes to look at things, we're actually redoing, for one of our larger clients right now, we're redoing all their service level agreements, because the service level agreements that were put in place when we won the contract several years ago no longer make sense. We're tracking an awful lot of paper-based metrics. They're moving away from paper. I don't know that law firms will ever be completely paper-free, at least without a good bit of scanning. But the point is that the metrics that we set 4 years ago don't necessarily always make sense anymore, and we're having active conversations about that. The other thing that struck me as we were talking about this is a dashboard doesn't necessarily, depending on the audience, doesn't necessarily have to be that complex. I'm on another project where part of the process is developing a software application. It's in yellow. Why is it in yellow? We have the details for that. But the CEO of the entity that we're helping build this for, he doesn't need to know all of that. He doesn't need to know the spreadsheet that's got 89 gajillion lines worth of stuff. He needs to know, is it red, yellow, or green? And it was red, and now it's yellow. And so we're improving, and we're hoping to turn green within the next couple of weeks. That's a good thing. That's as far as he needs to know about it. All the rest of the minutia is just that from his perspective. I see Angela's hand up.
Hi. Okay, so one of the struggles is when the layers up the chain of command get so high to the point where they don't totally understand the complexity or what we do in information governance and management. So finding a good way to report or even ask for what do you want to see becomes a challenge because they don't know what they want to see until they're asking for it on the fly. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for that, like because the lower the level, the more granular you can get, but the higher you go, they might not fully understand what you do in the first place.
I would say count on that fact that they don't. Um, I would also say, and I've run into this in everything from writing proposals to creating surveys to a lot of times you're better off putting something down on paper to show somebody, even if you know you've missed the target, than giving them a blank sheet and saying, what do you want? Because they don't know what they want, but they sure know that's not it. And you take that arrow because you've just saved a month of chasing somebody down. We need to talk about this. Please tell me something. So I choose to interpret that dynamic as a positive in some ways.
Fine, I'll take it as a positive.
Fine. Nick, go ahead.
For to build on that, I think that when you need to have the processes of your business kind of in place, right? For firms, you have matter mobility, disposition, right? Vendors. So if you have those segments of your industry, you can have automated stats for those that are quick to access. You want to be able to export a report. When someone asks, you can say, hey, here it is. And then while they're looking over that, you can drill down for more specifics if you need it. But having something that's easy to access on a broad level instantly to give to someone on an impromptu command, I think is huge. And then also you can have a win prepared as well. For example, they may ask what you're doing when it comes to transferring records out. And if you have, hey, the team got this many matters out, I can look into details on your specific request, but that gives them a something positive immediately to work with. And being able to guide them and have actionable questions in place. Again, we're the experts in our field, and they often don't know the specifics. And sometimes we can drill down into what they really need. I think, as you mentioned, that they don't really know what they need, but you can get to the essence and say, hey, these numbers we can dig into, but we're all set here. We're on course, and give them that comfort that what they need to know on an immediate basis as our supervisors or managers is taken care of, that we're on track, and that there's no exceptions to be talked about. There's no alarming red flags. And so to summarize, have automated the reports you can access quickly, know your sections, so know how to drill down as needed and have that positive win and know what they need in those specific areas.
Yeah, agree, Nick. Derek, you had your hand up there for a moment. Go ahead.
I did, yeah. I just feel like a lot of stuff we're talking about with SLAs or the reference to I don't know what I want, but I don't want that. It just seems so important that it doesn't become, I put it in the chat, but like a wish list. A big project that firms have, I think Jesse talked about this, is going paperless. Well, what does that mean? And so one of the reports that I really like, and I'm not going to go into commercial, but is being able to see items being created by folder, Redweld, so on, and then breaking that down by practice group. Are these people creating these for a reason? Is this paperless project something that is applicable to every group? And so being able to take the executive who just says, I don't know what I want, but I don't want that, and then people on the ground, and finding that conversation piece to hand it over to them, that there are exceptions. When I worked in office services, they said, hey, we want these mail runs and these deliveries. We didn't have enough FTEs, and so having a dashboard meant being able to communicate that in a way. I just feel like so much it's a moonshot without any real nuance around it, and that is somewhere I think dashboards plug in to be able to communicate that and get realistic expectations, have conversations around context and peripherals.
Yeah,
Agree.
it is all about the why. And I think when I talked before about the dealing with the humans and the fiefdoms and the politics, because my practice is to spend as much time as I can talking to people. I don't, I mean, it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes I do formal surveys and all that, but even that will be followed up with a conversation to better understand the why and the context. The other thing I'll say is a little bit of I'm looking at Angela's chat. See, you completely derailed me again for the best reasons. Um, okay, Sarah, good. Pile on, beat up on Steve time. Let's go. I think there is a value in letting some of the wish listing go on, because as you talk to people in different parts of the organization and playing different roles, sometimes a consensus can build, because you'll notice the same maybe handful of wishes across the board. And individually, it sounds like, yeah, right, in your dreams. But then you realize they're all talking about the same kind of thing. And so maybe that is a thing. It's not just a wish. It's a matter of bounding that so you don't spend 3 months chasing wishes. So I have, as a matter of practice, I've fallen into the custom when I talk to people to say, look, I can't promise anything. But what I can promise is if you don't tell me, it'll never make its way onto a list. So tell me, and if it fits, we'll do it. Or maybe it's not phase 1, it's phase 2. Or at least you're on record. So there's still a value to tell me what your wish list is. Otherwise, you got no shot.
No, because then you can turn it into educated wishes. Yes, I just watched Deadpool and Wolverine again last night.
Love that, Jesse. I love that.
So hi guys, I'm so sorry I'm late. I had
Woo!
I had this meeting and then I had the ARMA webinar meeting that I also thought was at 11, but it's at 12. So clearly I can't figure out how to tell time these days. Um, like anything else. I'm just curious if you guys had a chance to talk more about being strategic. I mean, you're talking about these wish lists and hey, what's on it, and working with them to actually have a strategy and prioritize the things that are on their wish list. To me, it's like you start out with all of these things and then you're starting to pare that down so you figure out what's the most important thing on that wish list. And have you used, in my previous life, we were very strategic and everything was in a dashboard and deciding, what fits and aligns with corporate strategy or corporate goals the most, right? And start building use cases and everything else to then help you getting over the finish line to actually kick off a project.
Yeah, Julie, early on in the conversation, we did touch upon um, building your dashboard to meet objectives and goals, KPIs, that kind of thing. We didn't specifically talk about the strategy around developing that, other than let's have a conversation, let's look at our SLAs, let's have a conversation, what's meaningful, how do you think we can measure this particular aspect of a goal or a KPI or whatnot, but not specific around that strategy.
A strategy to develop a strategy, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So why don't you go ahead and tell us one, Julie? at
A
last.
strategy to, well, yeah, I think that exercise is understanding the corporate objectives, right? And where does information governance or records projects, data governance, data anything align to what their vision and mission might be at that highest level, right? It was where I would think that they would want to start. Yeah, I mean, we don't do that as much here in my existing environment, but we're starting to because a new CIO started about 6 months ago. And he's like, where's all my dashboards and my objectives and my use case and, governance, project governance, right? So they're trying to build that structure now. And sometimes that's the hard part is figuring out where do you start? If you're already in the middle of 120 projects, and now you want to bring in the governance. I think that's where the change management and that structure has to come in and just starting to organize it all. I like using the dashboards, or it's a project worksheet that you're just putting it. I always think of it like back in the day when you had to write papers, you're doing a school project or whatever, and you start with everything and then you're continuing to pare it down and kind of create this continuous improvement approach and just start being open to experiment and moving things around. Sometimes I think we get so rigid that once we start something, we put it in a project plan, we don't want to move it. We want it just to be wherever we've started. So I think start where you are. I don't know if that answered your question, Steve, or if you're looking for a more specific use case, but to your point, it's like get everything on the list and then move it around.
Yeah, well, it kind of does. I mean, part of the purpose of today's call, like every month, is to just sort of explore and talk through things. My initial reaction, besides yes and yay, and really psyched that you're here, when I think about launching an information governance initiative, these are the conversations I think we should be having and probably are having anyway. But also to your point, retrofitting it is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And on the third hand, you got to start somewhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And I often say that the recipe to follow to do governance well is pretty straightforward, but it doesn't make it any easier. That's where I distinguish straightforward from easy. So yeah, I think it's all great. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna take over. We've got about 8 minutes left. Lewis, then Derek, then Melvin, and then we'll wrap up.
This was just a quick question based on something Judy said, because I agree with Jesse that it has to tell a story. A number of people said it has to tell a story. But part of what I hear Julie suggesting is sometimes you're just putting it there so it doesn't fall off the radar. Even if there's no story, we just want to make sure it's visible. So I wondered whether you thought that that had any value, those of you.
I can just add, I mean, we recently added 2 regional team leaders that report into me, and we started using Monday.com and just whatever tool you use, whatever dashboard you have. And that's exactly where we've started is here's everything out of my head onto this list, then create as projects. You've got a program. Everything in a program has projects, right? So now you're taking your program and you've got your projects, and you've got your tasks within those projects. And I've told, the 2 people that report to me now is be open to moving it around. You've got to start somewhere and have a visual that helps you and just be flexible, right? Because again, you're not going to create it out of the box and it's perfect and everything you want on it, right? And have to add and adjust and then add, to-do lists within a subtask. So we're sort of building it as things come up. And then if a new item, we have just another list below at the bottom that's the new item, something else that came up, and where does it fit in this priority? So having it be, real time and flexible, I think is helpful. And it does help to tell that story. And the story is always changing.
Yeah, it is. You've got to adjust and morph based off of new information coming in and potentially even new resources or people coming in. So it is about
Right.
the story, and the story always changes. Derek, go ahead.
Oh, just about, the wish list thing about getting it out there and starting that project, telling the CIO, tell me your dreams. It's about getting some of that buy-in too. I see it a lot with retention where they say we want to clear out all of this old stuff, and that is the wish list. That is the big item up there. But when you start showing them what that looks like, you can get so much leadership buy-in, and that helps. That momentum is really what pushes those wishes into actuality. And so I do think it's really important to have that out there as well as a goal, and then get leadership with some of that momentum behind it.
Yeah, I'll add real quickly to that because I want to make sure that Melvin has time. Um, Tying your disposition practices to data minimization is probably going to be a really cool metric to have on your dashboard, right? Melvin.
Yeah, just to piggyback what Julie said, which was a fantastic point about being strategic. One of the things that I experienced, the great experience at Workday, was that they had to use the software called and you probably guys are familiar with Workboard. It is a software that does strategic planning. We had our OKRs in there, everything from the C level folks all the way down to analysts, BSAs, and so forth were aligned. And then all we had to do was focus on developing and acquiring the data to support our OKRs for that particular quarter. And then the biggest thing I think about when I think about dashboards is dashboards are supposed to show value. What are we doing that shows value to the organization as an information governance program? And whatever the data is, however you acquire, whatever tools you have, I think that's the objective. That's all I have. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? Last parting thought based off of Melvin's feedback there? No? Okay. Well, then I'm going to start wrapping us up. I will start with Mr. Wilkins. One or two takeaways for the group.
Simple to understand visuals are better than highly complex, silly, crazy visuals, and know the story that you're trying to tell.
Perfect. Awesome. Steve.
As I wrestled with my office assistant here.
Well, the office assistant is lovely.
Yes, and that's not the end we want to see. Yes, tell a story, which brings me to know your audience. And somebody said it, stories are always changing, and the story you want to tell needs to change depending whether you're talking to a senior executive or, a worker bee. And the other is I'm really sort of taken by this notion of the governance tentacles reaching in as far as how to construct a dashboard. I could be the only one on this call, besides Skylar here behind me, who hadn't already made that connection. But to me, that's very powerful. We really do sit at the center of pretty much everything, because pretty much everything is reliant on information. And that's not nothing, as they say around these parts.
So true. So true. So thank you both. My parting thought for this group is not about our topic today. It's actually about you sharing out this community, you participating in our next event, which we haven't decided what that topic is yet. We have a meeting on Monday to discuss that, but keep a pulse on LinkedIn. That's where Steve usually posts the initial post for opportunities. And yes, Jesse, absolutely. We are always open to suggestions. Feel free to throw suggestions out at us because, the three talking heads come up with these ideas. you know and it's usually based off of things that we're experiencing with consulting or that we've heard from other folks, and they may have asked us to spark the conversation so that they could join in and learn. So we are open to suggestions. please share out this particular community. Again, it is free. It is vendor agnostic. We don't sell at you. This is about the community, learning from each other and sharing. So thank you all for joining. And we will have this recording in probably in the next couple of weeks out on the YouTube channel. If you don't know where that is, again, Steve posts that out on LinkedIn. So if you're not connected with Steve, you're missing out. So
I'll just
go
give you
there, do it.
very clever. YouTube.com/Steve Weissman. We found a home for it there, and there's a separate section. You'll see them if you just see all the videos, but they exist in a community. Yeah, and tell all your friends because
Yeah, and
this is
to
awesome.
answer
Thank you.
Lisa's question, we do not have a specific LinkedIn group. We've been talking about maybe doing some different branding, etc. So yeah, we're still just making some decisions there. So
Okay. I ask because I want to, because, hearing this, I want to repost and I could tag. So, I
yep,
mean, I could tag people
understood.
individually for now, but if there's a group, I could tag and just keep getting
Right.
the word out.
Right.
So, okay, cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Awesome.
thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a blessed rest of your week. And I hope if you celebrate Thanksgiving here in the States, I hope you fill your bellies with lots of food and lots of joy for your heart and your head. Peace and light, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much,
everybody.
everyone.
Hey, thank you.